The consumer who used to buy a $7 bottle of wine now trading up to a $10. Person who bought the $15 now trading up to the $20. The person who used to drink box wine now switching over to a bottle of wine. So premiumization is definitely a big trend. People are constantly trading up for wine for sure, and also in spirits.
What is up, my food marketing peeps? Welcome to episode number 43. On the show today, we have Luke Lahman, who is the field marketing manager for E&J Gallo. And if you're not already familiar, Gallo is the largest producer of wine in the world. They own and distribute a number of the popular wine and spirits brands that you'll see in most liquor and grocery stores like Barefoot, Apothic, and New Amsterdam Vodka. From being on the front lines to training and managing over 30 salespeople, Luke has spent his entire career in the industry, and he's really starting to make a name for himself. In this episode, you'll learn how to hire and motivate a strong sales team, what's a recipe for success when it comes to in-store marketing, what trends are emerging in the wine and spirits industry, and plenty more. So let's go hang with Luke.
Welcome to the Food Marketing Nerds Podcast, where we talk marketing, branding, and social media with the smartest minds in the business. Here's your host, Alex Osterlee.
So Luke, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You and I go way back, so I already know your story, but for our listeners who may not know much about you yet, can you give us a little bit of your background and tell us about yourself and how you made it to your current role?
Yeah, sure. I went to University of Colorado in Boulder.
Go Buffs.
And when I graduated, recruited by E&J Gallo Winery out of California. My first position with them was as a sales rep in Oklahoma City. So I made the big move from Boulder to Oklahoma City. Worked there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then moved into one of their distributors as a sales manager in Arizona, working for Alliance Beverage was what it was called. And then got promoted within Alliance Beverage to become the division manager. So then managing the sales managers for the state of Arizona for our distributor. And then just recently in the last 2 months, took over the field marketing manager role for Gallo back on the supplier side in Arizona.
So just the difference between the distributors and the supplier side, it's a little more complex than what I'm used to as far as whether it's supply chain or distribution goes. Can you tell us a little bit more about Gallo and how you guys are set up? Yeah.
So I'll just give you a quick background on the distribution system and I was talking about how I've gone from supplier to distributor. In the U.S., there's a 3-tier distribution system for alcohol. It's a way for the government to really monitor and regulate alcohol. It started in 1933 after Prohibition. So there's like a supplier, the person who basically creates the wine or the spirits, the alcohol, and then they have to go through a distributor who then ships the product to the retailer who sends it to the end consumer. So when I was working with Gallo now, I'm working with the supplier. And when I was with Alliance Beverage, now called Breakthrough Beverage, it was actually the distributor. So within the alcohol industry, people a lot of times bounce back and forth between the distributor and the supplier, and it's a really close relationship between the two.
And so if you're producing your own, whether it's a liquor brand or producing your own wine brand, you have to go through a distributor. You can't go direct to store?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. So even if you created your own Alex's wine brand, you couldn't just go to the store down the street and sell it. You'd have to go through a distributor.
That's interesting. So how does that provide a layer of whether it's surveillance or the government being able to monitor as opposed to going direct to store?
Yeah, so there's only a few major distributors within each state. So there's a few hundred, few thousand suppliers that they would have to monitor versus when you have to go through a distributor, then they really only have to monitor those distributors, those few distributors, and it's a lot easier to manage. Interesting.
And so can you describe the scale of Gallo?
Yeah. Gallo's the biggest wine company in the world. Based out of California, started in 1933, right after Prohibition. So been around a long time, and we have about 80 unique different brands of wine and spirits. So when you hear Gallo, we have a Gallo family that you see on the shelves, but there's also a lot of brands like Apothic and Barefoot and Color Rossi and Mirasu and a lot of others that they don't have the Gallo name on them, but if you go into a liquor store here in Arizona where I am, about 30% of all the wine on the shelf actually comes from us, from Gallo. And it just might be underneath a different name and not say Gallo on it.
So from a production standpoint, I'm curious, what's the difference between a box of, say, of Franzia or Yellowtail versus a bottle of, say, Silver Oak?
There's a lot of different factors that go into it. At the core of wine, it's kind of a farming industry, so it's where the grapes were actually grown, and the way that they're harvested is a big part of it. So like on a boxed wine, you could have grapes come from anywhere in California or anywhere really in the U.S., blend them together and, machine harvest them, versus a higher end wine comes from a very specific area, from Napa Valley or Sonoma. If you're talking about Silver Oak, comes from Napa, from a very small area. It's all about the climate, the temperature outside, the diurnal changes between night and day. They call it the terroir. So it's basically all the elements that make up the climate of an area, the soil and everything else that makes an area a good wine growing area. So when you're buying a good wine, you want it from a smaller, more localized place rather than, one that just says California and then they could pull the grapes from anywhere.
You correct me if I'm wrong. If it's not a sommelier, it's certified specialist of wine. You got your certification,
right?
Can you tell our listeners just a little bit more about that certification and what it entails to actually get that?
Yeah. So certified specialist of wine is a certification in the wine and spirits industry that's done through the Society of Wine Educators. So it's a test, and I actually took it about 3 or 4 years ago. And basically, it is a certification that you can put at your name so people know that you're speaking their language and that you understand kind of what's going on in the wine world, that you are a specialist within the industry. That basic test is a multiple choice test versus, a sommelier. The other side of it covers a lot more tasting and serving of alcohol and wine. So the certified specialist of wine that I got, there's one more level. It's the certified wine educator, which is an exam where you have multiple choice questions, short answer, a fault tasting, a varietal tasting where you have different wine varietals in front of you and you have to taste each one and identify which ones they are, and then an essay portion.
And so that essentially qualifies you. It's on a similar scale, I guess, a similar ranking of sommelier, just a different category.
Right. Just a different entity that qualifies you as a specialist versus a sommelier.
Now, kind of back to the question about the production of the different qualities of these wines. And I know wine is a pretty unique category of its own, and you've got lines that are produced from a mass scale standpoint that are in the $8 to $20 range that are available nearly everywhere in every liquor store or grocery store you walk into, depending on the state. And then you have the very high end, the $50, $100 bottles and up items, and they're all in the same portfolio a lot of times, at least from my understanding. So is that difficult to manage on the sales side?
Yeah, it is. And what we've done, you have different business units within the company. So, I cover all of them in Arizona, but we also have a special fine wine team. So when you go into a liquor store, a grocery store, when you're selling fine wine, a lot of times, they want to see a salesperson who's very knowledgeable on fine wine. The same person that comes in selling their $4 bottle of wine, they don't necessarily want to listen to that person if they're trying to sell them a $100 bottle of wine. So what we do with the sales force is we do have specialized people who are fine wine specialists versus a spirit specialist versus just a generalist who would sell in, any kind of wine. But there's a lot of credibility that comes with either, your CSW or your sommelier. And when people know that you have that, then they know that you have the ability to speak their language and you know what you're talking about when it comes to wine.
So from a training standpoint, since you've been on the management side of these sales teams, what does the training look like for someone who's a generalist or selling just a usual Gallo line that's maybe not on the higher end versus the high-end team?
So everyone gets the same sales training. Whether you're going to be selling the high-end stuff or the low-end stuff, you get the same basic Gallo sales training, which most people that we have come into the company in the industry don't know anything about wine, as I didn't at all when I first started. And as we always say, we try to recruit people who have the sales ability, but we can teach them about wine. You can learn, you can read about it, you can train them on wine. But the sales training is pretty rigorous, especially within the distributor partners and Gallo. You get a territory when you first start off as a sales rep, and you basically go through 10 days with your manager every single day, in the field, calling on stores, learning the ins and outs, and then another 8-week training program that It's very much in the field, though. They kind of throw you in, give you a territory, and train you as you go.
And from just a high level, what does that sales process look like? Is it you're teaching them how to maybe find areas where there is opportunity for upselling? Is it how to cold call or walk into a liquor store or grocery store that you don't actually sell in already? I guess, what does that look like from a high level?
Yeah, from a high level standpoint, so like when I walk into a store now, as a field marketing manager in Arizona, we evaluate the store in 5 key areas. So when we're looking at wine in a store, first of all is distribution. So is the wine in the store? Have you sold in the distribution? So is it on the shelf? The second is shelf, so shelf positioning. So, if you're the industry leader, you don't necessarily want somebody sliding in to the right of you. And if you're attacking the industry leader, then, you want to slide in next to them. The third is a cold box. So if you go shop at a grocery store, one of the best real estate spots is the cold box, because that's where people are having impulse purchases on their way to the register. And so that's a highly sought after area is a cold box.
So the cold box is what is the cold box?
Yeah, it's a refrigerated section within like the grocery store or liquor store.
Got it.
And then the fourth is displays. So when you walk into a liquor store, a grocery store that sells wine or beer, and there's a big display. That's how we also evaluate stores. And the final is pricing and the point of sale that you put on, whether it's the pricing or on the shelf. So 5 key areas that we look at when we walk into a store to evaluate how it's going: distribution, shelf, cold box, displays, and then pricing and POS.
Now, from your experience throughout your career, it sounds like you've handled some of the in-store marketing and the display aspect of it all. So can you speak to that point a little further?
The biggest way to increase sales in store level, a lot of times once you have the distribution and the right spot on the shelf, is then selling in the big display, the large amounts of cases. You get a lot more impulse purchases, and you can usually give the retailer a lower price if they buy in a large amount of cases, which helps you get more movement and sell more product. So in-store marketing, there's a lot of different things you can do on the shelf. We have what are called shelf talkers. If you walk into a store and see ratings and accolades and certain critics on the wines. There's also radio ads in stores a lot of times, a lot of philanthropy partnerships, and then different things in stores that we do for marketing is floor stickers, racks, coupons, different banners, that sort of thing. But it's very highly competitive and can be highly regulated in a lot of ways. Every state's different, but you can't give them a certain amount of a dollar amount in their store. So if you give them a $300 rack, then you might be maxed out for the year, and you can't give them anything else for the year.
Interesting. So it's basically a limit on the amount of discounts that you can give, depending on the state?
It's limited on the amount of promo goods that you can give them in their store. Yeah. Every state creates their own laws, so it's a different amount and a different rule in every state. That's
interesting. I guess that protects the smaller guys from getting basically just bled out from the larger guys who can just discount until people can't compete.
Yep, exactly.
So in your experience, is there a general recipe for success when it comes to in-store displays or the marketing that you're mentioning?
Yeah, so it's all about location as far as in-store displays go. So when you walk into a liquor store or a grocery store, the prime spots, are the way we look at it is the way that you walk the store. So it's the lobby spot when you first walk in, and then when most people shop the store, they shop the perimeter. So we look at the store the way that a shopper looks at it. You come in and you go to the right. Most people walk the perimeter. If you're talking about a grocery store, they'll hit the meat section and the cheese. So those are prime spots to be in. If you're talking about a liquor store like in Colorado, then you're talking about the front spot, the lobby spot, and then counter and register spots where there's a lot of high pause and high traffic areas is what you're looking for.
Interesting. Well, you just described my trip to the grocery store to a T. So a grocery store and a liquor store can only have so much square footage and so much signage and display. So how does one convince a liquor store or grocery store to use the in-store marketing that you provide them?
A lot of different ways, and also very different in different states. So in Arizona, about 85% of all the wine sold in retail is through grocery chains versus Colorado, it's 100% liquor stores, and every chain can have only one license. So if you're talking about Arizona, convincing them to use your marketing in the store. A lot of it is done by an account manager at a national level who has a buyer and sells in the marketing elements. And then the sales rep will come in and execute on those elements and make sure that they're up. And if you're talking about Colorado, where it's independent liquor stores, it's a little bit different, where the sales rep can go in and basically it's all about building a relationship with that store. And then, that's kind of usually how you convince them how to use your marketing versus somebody else's.
So it's fairly relationship based, especially given that there is a set limit on how much swag or promotional offers that you can provide, depending on the state, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Very relationship-based industry.
And so how different are these laws and why are they so different from state to state?
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. In Arizona, we have Kroger, which is fries, and it's called King Soopers in Colorado. It's a huge chain that has 130 stores. So all 130 of their stores can have liquor licenses, and they can sell, as much as they want in all those stores. And they have one warehouse that we ship thousands of cases to every day, and then they ship to their own individual stores. So when they buy into their warehouse, they can buy at a really low price, and they distribute out to their own stores. So that's different versus other states like Colorado and some other control states that the distributor ships directly to them, but they can't buy at the same quantity deal level that the large chains can when they own multiple licenses. So they usually get a higher price than what you would from a chain store.
Interesting. So it sounds like not only are the laws different in how you can interact or work with the marketing teams of these different liquor stores or the owners, but the distribution is completely separate as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you know why the laws themselves are so different from state to state?
Yeah, so it all goes back to 1933 after Prohibition, and there was a lot of control on the alcohol industry as they came out and legalized alcohol. And each state, they gave states the power to control the liquor laws, and each one has just kind of decided as they've gone along, how much control they're going to give away and what they're going to open up. And it's one of the trends in the industry right now is more and more states are going to opening up the market to be able to sell in grocery stores and be able to sell on Sunday and that sort of thing. So it's funny when you go to different states and you see the way that alcohol is sold. It's very fragmented and different no matter where you go.
Are distributors, do they have offices and territories in different states?
Yeah. And that's actually another industry trend is consolidation. So the distributor here in Arizona has 13 different states that they distribute in. They're called Breakthrough Beverage. There's the largest one in the U.S. is called Southern Glazers, and they're in like 40 some states right now. So even though they operate within that many states, every single state still has those different laws and they have to operate a different way. But that's definitely something that's going on in the industry right now is that the distributors, the suppliers, and the retailers are all kind of consolidating more and more so. So Southern Glazers, the biggest distributor in the U.S., used to be two companies, used to be Southern and Glazers, and they recently merged last year. And the other two largest distributors are Republic National Distributing Company and then Breakthrough Beverage. And Breakthrough Beverage used to be Charmer Sunbelt and Wirtz, and they merged in the last 2 years also. So a lot of consolidation going on, and there's a lot of definitely distributors operating in multiple states.
Interesting. What is the economic driver behind all these consolidations?
Kind of speaks to like another trend happening in the alcohol industry is it gives them the ability to have national account managers. It gives them the ability to have, as I was talking about Kroger, have a account manager or a person inside Kroger who can sell in a program or a wine, and it goes to, all 40 states where they operate. So then they're really only paying one person for all these distributions, where back in the day, it used to be everyone would have to go into each individual store by themselves and sell in each wine, where you can make a pitch now and sell in, 1,000 distributions to different stores. Well,
much more efficient.
Yeah.
So kind of speaking on that topic of trends, and I know being on the ground level, setting pricing, et cetera, you probably have some pretty good insights that, you probably have the first take at what's going on for these emerging trends. Can you speak to that a little bit as far as any other trends that you're starting to see in wine and spirits?
Yeah. One big trend that we're starting to see is premiumization. So people starting to trade up on their wines. The consumer who used to buy a $7 bottle of wine now trading up to a $10. Person who bought the $15 now trading up to the $20. The person who used to drink box wine now switching over to a bottle of wine. So premiumization is definitely a big trend. People are constantly trading up for wine for sure, and also in spirits. So, just my company has gone from about 15 years ago, premium wine wasn't even a big portion. It was about 5% of the company. And, we're hoping for about 40% of our revenue this year to come from premium wine. So wow. It's happening with us for sure, premiumization, but also within the industry.
I wonder if that is something to do with generation, the way the generations are coming to age, and millennials, our generation is definitely maturing into their prime spending years. So I'm curious if it's that, or if it's more of a societal shift of indulging more. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a little bit of both. And part of the challenge, or one of the things we like to do though, is also educating people on, what is a premium wine. I think a lot of times people are intimidated when they go to the grocery store and buy wine because they don't know anything about it. So, just something easy, educating people on, this region is a good region, this one is a more generic area, that sort of thing, to give people confidence to be able to trade up. Something that we've been working on. I think that's part of what's driving is people becoming a little more educated on their wine knowledge.
And when it comes to the education piece, what mediums are you using to actually educate the consumers?
Yeah, so there's a lot of in-store stuff that we do now, both from the shelf, just shelf talker sort of things, and then there's a lot of like scan codes that we do that lead to a website that you can read about the region, that sort of thing, and then a lot of social media. So social media linking up to the brand websites that you can see where the wine is from, or the history of it, or where it's produced.
Interesting. So these scan codes, are they typically QR codes, like Snapchat codes?
Yeah, there are some QR codes, but what's more used is text codes. So text whatever wine to this number, and it'll send you a link then that you can read about the wine.
Interesting. Do you have a general idea around what the conversion rate on the text to find out concept is?
I'm not sure on what the conversion rate is.
It's interesting though. I think QR codes are really interesting, that they somewhat failed, but I feel like they're kind of making a comeback a little bit. I've still never scanned a QR code, not out of my actual curiosity, more just to see what a company is trying to pull with a QR code. So we'll see.
Yeah, QR codes are they're funny because even if our generation doesn't do it, and like I've done the same thing where it's like, oh, there's a QR code, like let me scan it. Like, oh man, I haven't downloaded the app. Like now I got to go into it. It takes a little bit too much time, I think, for an impatient generation to scan the actual QR code.
Yeah, I think the text to find out more, I think, is the way to go, because it seems less intrusive. It's like where I have a chance to another filter to decide whether I want to actually click through a link, or if you just scan a QR code, you're going directly to a website and then you get retargeted. But
right.
So kind of to that point of these in-store initiatives and social media. I know before the call we mentioned the recent ad campaign that you guys are launching around New Amsterdam Vodka. Can you speak to that a little bit?
June 1st, we launched a new campaign for New Amsterdam Vodka. It's based around some digital and some TV advertising. It's going to be over $10 million campaign. The very first launch was on the first game of the NBA Finals. Ran a New Amsterdam commercial on ABC. And then we're going to continue to kind of hit it as a 360 marketing campaign from ESPN. We're going to be doing TV commercials. We did a YouTube takeover. So we were the banner ad on YouTube on June 2nd. On June 3rd, then we did a Snapchat takeover. So we had a Snapchat filter. And then throughout the finals for the NBA, you'll see New Amsterdam commercials running.
It sounds like the target demographic is very sports focused, male, sounds like.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're going after with this campaign. But vodka in general is not necessarily male focused. But what we're going for on this campaign called Pour Your Soul Out was based around more male dominated.
And so I know, having been on the selling side of getting a brand on Snapchat, the demographic of its user base is fairly young. So do you know what the process was, or what the thought process behind targeting a vodka on a platform that skews a bit younger?
No, actually not necessarily sure why they went with that. We have a brand team the New Amsterdam brand team out of Modesto that handled that to make that decision. And then kind of my job is to implement it here in Arizona in the market.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant that it's a completely underutilized space for brands. And yeah, depending on how it's executed, I think it's a great place for any brand to be. But yeah, I was just curious. But yeah, you're starting to see more and more of the progressive and forward-thinking brands on Snapchat with paid and with organic.
It's like a kind of a running joke that in every single marketing meeting we have, millennials come up. There's no way to like avoid it. It's almost just like we all kind of smile when we say it, but we can't get through one meeting talking about marketing without mentioning millennials.
And why is that in the industry?
It's just the target demographic. Especially if you can get, it's the same as a lot of products, but you can get millennials hooked on something early. If you can get somebody who's 21 to 35 hooked on it now, the idea is that they'll be a consumer for the rest of their lives, but also they're trendsetters. So when you're talking about wine and spirits, if they see somebody who's drinking a certain wine who's maybe younger and more trend setting, then somebody else might start drinking that if they see them drinking that.
And kind of to that same point, one of our discussions outside of the podcast was the increase in sales in rosé.
Yeah.
So when did you see that spike in rosé, and what do you think is causing that?
Rosé trend is kind of a crazy one. Started, depending on what part of the country you're in, it started maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe it's just starting now if you're in other areas of the country. It really started in the Northeast. This is the way it happens a lot of times with wine in the industry, is it starts on premise. So bars and restaurants became very popular in the Northeast in bars and restaurants. And then it just kind of migrated its way west and into retail stores. And you look at the shelf sets in a liquor store, and you used to have maybe 3 rosés, and now you'll have 30 or 40 rosés. So it's a really strong trend. And one of the most the biggest areas that rosé is doing a really good job in is in Provence. It's a dry style rosé. It's like a true French rosé. So that's one of the biggest regions that's been really hot in rosé.
Interesting. Now, I know career-wise, you haven't been in the industry for that long compared to, I'm sure, a lot of people in the industry, but have you seen out the life of a trend like this before?
I'm trying to think of something on this scale. I can think of a few products that we've launched that have run their cycle. There's one that we had called Vanique. It was a vodka and Moscato shimmery sort of thing, and it was a big trend, in bars and nightclubs and New Year's, that sort of thing, and it was kind of a flash in the pan, and then now it's going away. So yeah, I've seen a few things rotate through like that, but rosé seems to have some staying power. Another example is that a lot of millennials would probably know is Fireball, on the Scotch side.
Mm-hmm.
So Fireball had been around actually for a long time, underneath a different name, and then they just kind of blew up, and now they're kind of tapering off, and it'll be interesting to see if they stay around or if they just kind of fall off.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just trying to think if someone who's listening to this is saying, oh, maybe rosé is hot right now, maybe I'll jump in and try to create my own rosé. Sounds a lot more difficult than I would want to take on myself, but
yeah.
It's
funny with wine too. It takes a long time. So you got to think about the time it takes to grow the grapes. It takes 3 to 4 years if you're going from the very beginning, from planting a vine to getting yieldable fruit and harvesting it and then fermenting it. And it takes a long time. So if you're not up with the current trends, if you're behind it, by the time you start right now starting to get into a trend, you could be way behind and the trend could be gone by the time you produce your wine.
Yeah. So it sounds like to actually get in on one of these trends, either you have to have already been producing it or have the infrastructure and scale to make a quick tweak
Yep, exactly.
Or relatively quick in the wine industry.
Exactly.
Now, kind of changing gears just a little bit, I know that one of your big responsibilities has been to hire and train these sales teams.
Yep.
So what do you look for in a good salesperson?
Lots of different things. One of the biggest things I look for, though, is somebody who can push through adversity. So whether that's a difficult buyer or a down month, the way that somebody is able to push through adversity is going to say a lot about what they're going to be able to do on the sales team. So that's really one of the number one things I look for. But also there's a lot of different things. A we look for a lot is leadership. We promote within very quickly. So do you have leadership capabilities? Have you managed a team before? Do you, even if you were recruiting at a college, were you the person who was the captain of your team? Were you the person in your groups who was the group leader, that sort of thing? And then the sales personality, really just sit down. And that was what I like to do in interviews too, is just sit down and say, okay, can I talk to this person for an hour? Or if I was on a flight from LA to New York, can I talk to this person and have a genuine conversation with them for that amount of time?
Now, when you're testing or hiring for adversity, or being able to get through adversity, what do you look for? Is that something that you find on the resume, or how do you pre-qualify somebody for their ability to get through adversity?
Really, it's more than a resume. It's a question. It's a question I always like to ask is, give me a difficult situation and how you overcame it, that sort of thing. And the situation doesn't really matter as much as their answer. It can be a very small situation, but if there's somebody who would push through and you can see that, then that's what you look for.
So once the sales team has been hired, is there anything that you do to motivate your team, or is it more finding the right people who will motivate themselves?
Yeah, no, it's both. So you want somebody who's self-motivated, definitely. But a big part of my job is setting incentives for the sales force, and really being, kind of the rah-rah person for the state for my supplier. Yeah, there's different incentives based on, the amount of cases you sell in, the distributions you get in, the displays, that sort of thing that I set for the sales team in Arizona.
Is there anything, speaking from personal experience, any incentive or type of incentive that you've seen to motivate people the most?
Yeah. So I really like doing trips. We do a lot of like winery trips, things out to California, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, a big driver is always money, right? So how many dollars per case are they going to get, that sort of thing. But the biggest thing also is pitting people kind of, against each other in sales, right? So having a leaderboard of this is where everyone's at, and driving competition is a big part of it.
Are there any deal breakers when it comes to a sales interview when you are trying to make the right decision on somebody? Really,
the ability to just sit down and have a conversation. If the conversation is difficult, if it's me constantly trying to pull things out from them, if I feel like I have to, keep the conversation going rather than them, that's kind of a red flag to me, that if you're in front of a buyer, if you're in a sales pitch and you can't hold somebody's attention, then you're not necessarily going to be a good salesperson.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, especially with the industry and being so relationship based. We have a few questions that we ask each of our guests. Are there any, I know managing a bunch of different people on your team, plus all the other responsibilities that you have on a day-to-day basis, are there any productivity hacks that you use from day to day just to get your work done?
The biggest thing for me is I write everything down. So I've got a notebook that I carry, and it's funny, you'll see whether I'm in a store or in my office or whatever, I've got a notebook, I write everything down. I write everything down in a notebook, and then I also got, we're very much calendar based. So if it's not on the iCloud calendar, then it may as well not exist. So that's kind of how everything works. And it's funny, even in between distributors or meeting anybody else, everyone just kind of knows if you want somebody to actually show up to a meeting, you better have it on their calendar.
What's the best piece of career advice that you've ever been given?
I had my favorite professor at CU, actually. He was the former CMO of Coors. I met with him a lot for career advice. And one of the things he always said was there's 3 reasons why you should take a job or stay with your job. And most people only get 2 of these. So if you can get all 3 of these reasons, then you're doing really well and you're in a great position for yourself. 3 reasons, though, were money. Are you making the money that you want to? 2 is, are you growing yourself and obtaining new skills or knowledge? They're going to get you to where you want to be, or are you constantly growing? And then 3, are you enjoying it? Do you love actually showing up to work every single day? So most people only get 2 of those, and some people only get 1. But if you can get all 3 of those things, then you should either take the job or stay with the job that you're at, because those are the 3 most important things.
Yeah, I think that's definitely sound advice. So if you could go back in time to teach yourself something right as you're starting your career, what would that be?
I'd probably tell myself or teach myself that it's never too soon for an idea. I think starting out, I felt like I was a part of a big company that kind of had it all figured out. But in reality, every good idea starts somewhere, and oftentimes the best ideas or insights come from people at the bottom of the totem pole, or people just starting out, or young people. That's something I didn't necessarily realize when I very first started. Speaking out early is never too soon for a good idea.
That's good advice, and I think it's definitely so from people in your position now to foster that kind of environment where people feel that their creativity or their ideas are worthwhile and worth telling people at least. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it's something we definitely fostered. I didn't realize when I'm very first starting out that your idea is super valuable, especially if you're a sales rep who's in the stores every day and you have the best knowledge of anybody of what's going on and different trends.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Luke. And where's the best place for people to find out more about Gallo and what you guys have going on?
Honestly, probably just website, e&amp.com is the best place to look, and you can see our portfolio, history, everything about the company right there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Luke.
Great. Thanks a lot, Alex.
Thanks for listening to the Food Marketing Nerds Podcast. For interview transcripts or to download your free social media ebook, check out foodmarketingnerds.com.